Hey, hello everyone, and welcome to the Brand Architect podcast, the podcast that helps you build your brands online and make them lovable. So, this is another live stream. I'm streaming this time on LinkedIn and on Periscope. So I will be experimenting, but I will be streaming on LinkedIn all the time. So that's going to be the permanent place for this. And you can listen to it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, and everywhere else. So today, let me introduce my guest. Hello, Jeremy.
Hi, how are you doing?
Fine,
Hi,
thanks. So Jeremy Carson is the creative director at Saatchi & Saatchi, and also he's a keynote speaker. And he's basically from the few people who actually believe that the creative side and the heart and the soul side of things and the data and the tech and the science behind it are the two things that are equally important, and they should coexist together, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's always been my perspective on technology and creativity. They always have lived together. People just for some reason see them at odds with each other. But I don't know, never made sense to me. So I always smashed them together and made it work.
Yeah, I mean, I'm true believer that they should coexist, and both are equally important, because when, even in life situations, not even about marketing, right? In life situations, when you just rely on one or the other only, it's never kind of, not always it works out. So it's always much better to just combine both and get most out of both. Okay,
I feel like it's probably because I was a middle child. I have a couple older sisters and a younger sister, and they always say the middle child likes just let everyone get together and make everyone like be friends. That was me. So I don't know, maybe I'm just looking for a way for creativity and technology to be friends.
Okay, yeah, interesting. So do you have this same feeling that the creative part and especially from the marketing perspective in the tech sector is something that needs a bit of improvement at the moment?
Oh, absolutely. I think that the issue is everyone leans one way or the other right now.
Mm-hmm.
There's the creative shops. When it comes to marketing, you've got ad agencies and all the really famous ones and all the ones that you don't really hear, but everyone just has come from that same perspective where creativity is the way that you need to solve problems, pure creativity. And it's this idea of telling a great story is it. Of course, that is incredibly important. But then on the other side, you have people that just lean straight into technology, straight into tactics and the execution of things, and only look at, well, it's about the media, it's about the targeting, the data informed perspective of everything. And they do things like, well, we're going to change this color of the button from red to blue because the data says that the blue one was the one that performed better. But it doesn't necessarily make sense if the red button was more on brand and it aligned with the creativity. So the issue, I think, is people are only going one way or the other way. They're not looking at where to pull the best from both worlds and how to make them integrated into a more interesting way. And so I think we have a really long way to go. And there's some places that are going in the right direction. But the biggest issue is not necessarily for the data informed people to allow creativity in the world, but I actually feel that the creative people allowing the data informed world into theirs is the far more difficult step in this process, because creatives have big egos. I mean, we have to, because we have to have this ability to think we can come up with these solutions, which we do. We have to. But with that comes the idea that, well, if I've been able to do this before, I should be able to do this now, and I don't need a bunch of numbers in order to tell me. I don't need to be able to measure the success of my ideas, because my gut is the thing that tells me if it's working. And so being able to use more information, to me, has always been able to fuel creativity. Unfortunately, the way that we've been using data and technology in the past has kind of kept a bias and a more raw use of technology that isn't the most creative. And so kind of teaching and helping and figuring out how to use data and technology in a more creative way is the biggest hurdle we have to hit right now.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think it's a big advantage that now we do have data, and we can see what's going on behind the the scenes, because before it was just putting it out there, and very often we didn't even know whether it was working or not, and what was the scale of it, and how many people actually consumed your content, for how long, etc., etc. We still don't have like ideal kind of stats, for example, on LinkedIn viewerships, like how many minutes were viewed exactly, and how many people stuck until the end, etc., etc. So we get like at a high level thing at the moment. But I think probably the best thing is to just not forget that behind numbers there are people. And that could probably simplify things a little bit, and kind of, because very often when you immerse in data, you just see graphs and it looks like maths, and you just forget that, it's all about people, their behavior, their reactions, and all that stuff. So I guess it's something that we should take into account.
100%. I mean, I got to give credit where credit's due. My CCO, Jason Traeger, he is one of the great ad men that's been around for a while, and he's really smart, and he's deep into the storytelling world. But he actually is told me, and has said over and over, he said, Jeremy, data is people. That's all it is. The number of people that are engaging with your video and are watching, to 50%, where that just means that people like it. That means this many people were watching your video. It's not some kind of amorphous, zeros and ones. It's just actual people. And I completely agree with him. I think it's great when people look at it from that perspective, because then it's not just, percentages and bar graphs, like you said. It's about what's the behavior? How can I read into the behavior of people and then interpret it and create around that behavior?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back to the very beginning of your story. Like, how did you end up in the space? Marketing, advertising, creative space, which is very exciting. These days, also data driven. So, what was your journey in that space?
I was incredibly lucky. I have two very artistic parents. My father and my mother both went through art programs in college, and my dad, little early in his career, he opened up his own shop for marketing, and he's a hustler. He'll do everything from packaging to web to PR to advertising. And so very early on, when I was about halfway through high school, I started working with him, doing just some odd jobs, design projects, because I myself went through graphic design. Mm-hmm. But in high school, I thought I was going to be actually a fine artist. I had no idea that, advertising in the career was something that I was really into. I thought I was going to be a starving artist. Actually, I thought that was a viable carear path. I didn't realize the word starving is right there.
Title, right?
Yeah, I know. You think I would have gotten the hint. But I went through senior year, and I actually there's this kind of thing that you submit to a panel of people to get evaluated on your ability to do art in high school in the States, and it's called the AP tests. And I submitted mine, and I got a 2 out of 5, which is low. It's lower than half. And I was very surprised, because everyone thought, Jeremy's a good artist. He thought I would do well. But I realized, and my teacher realized, it was because all the design and everything that I submitted, it wasn't really fine art. It was more in the world of graphic design, and they didn't really like that. But on the plus side, she said, well, why don't you go into graphic design? And so then I started applying to colleges, and I found one that really fit well, happened to be the same one my father and my mother went to. I went through that college, Cal State University Long Beach in Southern California. And at the end of that program that I was doing, I had a teacher that was teaching a couple advertising classes. And he was really talking about the idea that advertising from a art perspective is about communicating ideas, big ideas, and creating different ways of communicating that idea. And I really loved that, because I've loved the feeling of coming up with something and building it. And so, I went into advertising, and he helped me get a internship at Ogilvy in Los Angeles. This was years and years and years ago. And I started working there, and I went from, I was doing a lot of freelance work before that. I was doing a lot of design work on my own. Working at a big agency world really allowed me to see that you can dive into a specialty and really be a focused specialist in a whole bunch of different areas. But for me, art and technology turned out to be where my passion really was, because I mean, anybody that has started to get into the ad world has realized that when you're a junior, when you're an intern, they just throw you on the little projects, right? The stuff that the big shots don't want to work on. And at that time, it turned out to be all the digital stuff, which just fit right in my wheelhouse. And I just started to have this passion for being able to figure out how to make digital work more creative than was expected. And so over the next 4 or 5 years, I was working there. I worked at another couple of agencies, and the idea of social and digital really started taking off. It was when we started to transition from Facebook being purely a like social platform to being something that had a really strong advertising presence. And it required people to think a little bit more on how to advertise on that platform, because it wasn't just about making essentially direct mailer or direct response kind of advertising. It was something that needed to have storytelling. And so through that process of kind of working with different creatives that were really good at storytelling and developing my own storytelling capabilities and my own knowledge of the technology, I started to become a little bit more of a specialist in that specific area. And then lately, say lately, it's been about 5 years now, I went to Saatchi & Saatchi, and I've worked in the data informed creative group. And that is, it blew my mind when I got in there, because the amount of data that we can work with, but also should work with, was one of the biggest topics that we had to think about. It's a light touch, but it's also the right touch. It's knowing what you should say to someone so that you're not freaking them about how targeted or personalized the information is. But it's also
it may get creepy.
Oh, I know. Absolutely. It gets really scary, because there's just so much that we have access to. Again, it's all anonymized. I don't know who any of these people are, but I'm able to give big chunks of people certain pieces of information. But once I started realizing what that light touch is, and then how to bring creative storytelling into this world, it just opened up my eyes, because I like to say it allowed us to talk to a person and not to people, because we've been so used to talking to people and just saying a big mass message to everyone. Now that I know, oh, this group of people over here, they're interested in this specific piece of the brand, this specific aspect of the brand, and I can tell them something different than I'm telling someone over here. Oh, that just completely changes things. I don't need to make one 30-second spot that speaks to everyone in the same way. I can make several, smaller pieces of content and target them. And so it just got me really excited. And I've been doing that for the past 5 years and helping other people do it. And my team is great. My ECD is one of the brainchilds behind this whole thing. And I love it.
Interesting. Nice. I mean, let's talk about like that, because I think it's very useful even for like, small personal brands online, and, even for people who are just using social media to share their strengths and knowledge, for example. Like, like we're broadcasting on LinkedIn. Many people are trying to figure out LinkedIn, because LinkedIn became a content creator's sort of, space relatively recently, right? So before it wasn't really. The importance of tailoring the messages to the people you're talking to, and the level of personalization. Like, many people don't really know where to start and how to deal with those concepts, because again, they are relatively new and not everyone has had the experience with those. Like, where do you start? Like, what do you look at? How do you actually deal with it?
Yeah, it's difficult, because it's kind of like this big pool. It's the blank canvas effect when it comes to artists. The scariest thing is blank canvas, because you don't know where to make that first mark. And so to me, it's all about just funneling it down to the smaller things that you're trying to change. So for instance, actually a piece of content I just posted today is the idea of contextual creative. Start with the idea of, where is it that you're putting out your creative, and what is the most appropriate piece of creative to put in that place. So if you're putting something on LinkedIn, maybe it doesn't feel right for Instagram. Maybe it does. Maybe you have such a niche audience that you're able to do that. But the issue is with large brands, they have problems where they make this mistake of, we made a TV spot and that's a video. Where videos, well, YouTube. So let's put our TV spot on YouTube. Oh, it's also that videos, they can go on Facebook. Let's put that same video on Facebook. And let's also put that video on Instagram. And let's cut 10 seconds out of it and put on Snapchat. And it's just this idea of echoing content all over the place, when at the very least, you need to pay attention to best practices. What do people respond to on that platform? What's their behavior? If people like to explore things non-linearly, meaning like they like to skip around, or they don't have to be forced to watch second 0 to second 30, you need to make your content cater to that. If they like to do audio only, you need to work with that. If they like to have supers up on the screen, you need to do with that. So the context of what the content is probably the best place to start, because that means that you're paying attention to the behavior of the people on that platform in order to make the most appropriate content. Okay. And then after that, it's just the world's open from there, because then when you start to think about people's behavior and people on a more individual level, you can dive deeper and deeper and deeper, and it gets overwhelming if you don't pace yourself. Oh
yeah, absolutely. So another thing that many people get challenged by is, very often we talk, when we talk about personalization, we also talk about niching down and coming up with your ideal listener or ideal reader, or whoever you're targeting, right? And many people are very scared to make that choice, because they feel like they are missing out for all the others that don't fit towards that small group of people, right? So what are like, if when you are choosing the target audience, the target market, like what are the parameters? What do you take into account in order to be able to make the right decisions? Like, how do you choose?
This is really interesting, because what we've traditionally done in marketing and advertising is defined this aspirational target audience. It's like one, maybe it's a small like niche group, or maybe it's a bigger kind of clump of people. I think as you're starting as a brand, you should definitely do that. You should define like who is your main target. But as brands start to grow, they need to define multiple targets. But to figure out who those people are, it sounds messy, but honestly, just start putting stuff out that you feel is appropriate for what you want to do, and then look at who reacts. Because the people who react to you are going to be your core audience. And that may not be as clear as you think. I actually started putting content out to build around new creatives, early creatives. The idea of, I don't feel that a lot of academia teaches some of the things that really help people survive in the business, in the industry. Which they can't always do, because they have to teach people how to create and how to execute, right? So a lot of the things that we learn in our first couple, 2 to 5 years of being in the industry, we have to learn by diving into the deep end. So anyway, I started creating work around that. But then as I started to talk about some other things I was passionate about, I realized my audience was expanding from just students to even veteran creatives. And I wasn't intentionally making that happen. And so as I looked at the data, as I looked at who was engaging with my work, everything from age range to I was simply putting out a survey when people would be downloading content. I would ask them if they're a student or what their level is or anything like that. It's now about 50-50 between people who have been in the industry for a while and people who are students or incoming creatives. And so therefore I have 2 pieces of content that I always put out. I put out some more instructional stuff, and I put out some more like high level thinking, like what we're talking about right now. And that wasn't a choice, or that was a choice I had to make, but it wasn't a choice of, well, who do I want to talk to? I'm only going to talk to those people. Now, of course, there's fringe, there's always fringe, but those are my 2 big core audiences. And even a niche person like me, I've only got, several thousand people on LinkedIn that follow me, but I would by no means say I'm a huge personal brand. I still have 2 target audiences, because that's what the data's told me. I didn't make that decision on my own. The data said, these are your 2 chunks of people you should talk to. So that's what I do. And as long as they align with what my values are and what it is that I want to talk about, that works out. So I'd say, don't overthink it. Just look at who likes your stuff and just, keep putting that out and talk to those people.
Yeah, makes sense. Another thing that many people are kind of, we started talking, especially now at these times when we got the COVID-19, the lockdown, the quarantine, people, being either out of work or just temporary kind of working remotely and all that stuff, right? Many people are realizing the idea of, when they're working in a corporate world, or when they're working for an employer, they somehow, especially if it's for a long period of time, many people identify them through their employers, right? Part of their identity, biggest part of their life is linked to that. And when that kind of goes away, there is nothing out there in terms of online presence that showcases their own talents or their own personality or themselves apart from the employer, right? Especially on LinkedIn, it's kind of for a long time. It's been just a place where you were putting a placeholder of your history of your employers, basically, more or less, right?
Right.
So many people realize this importance of actually creating something that is of their own, and building a space where they can be themselves and not just an employee of a certain brand. I mean, you have your own content on a personal level. You're also part of the Sachi. How do you balance the two? Because very often it's hard to make the decisions and to maneuver the right way, because sometimes you're also cautious that no matter what, you're also part of the brand and that you are representing, whether you want it or not, that you can't really separate it completely, right? So
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's really difficult when you're an employee of someone or a company, and you want to say some more challenging or risk-taking statements out there because that's what you truly believe. I mean, I doubt there's a lot of people that 100% align with what a company believes, and especially because companies are not supposed to have a wide range of beliefs. They're kind of supposed to be narrow, right? I've had conversations had with me about making sure that I'm cautious about what I say, because when you have a voice and people are listening to you, they start to think that you represent, like you said, the company that you work for, and you don't want to. If so, Saatchi is one of the big agencies, especially in LA. But it's a huge agency. Toyota is our client, Toyota USA, and we do so much work for them. But that doesn't just include the data-informed world that I live in, and it includes traditional media, traditional advertising and marketing, PR, everything. And so the statements that I make about the data-informed world is what makes us so passionate about what the work that we do. But it, at the same time, has to not alienate the rest of creativity, because and that's kind of a big part of where I'm coming from, where I say it's not about one side or the other side, it's about both sides working together, because that's where even our agency is going. It's about everyone understanding the value of both things and working together. Yeah. And they're taking a lot of strides to actually integrate data at the center of our entire process so that all aspects work. But beside the point, when you're speaking from a personal brand and you don't own your voice, essentially, you just need to be respectful, to be completely honest. That's kind of all you really need to do. And I think that people will respect that from a leadership perspective and understand that what you say is, to a degree, representative of the other people that you surround yourself with. And if you are too polarizing, if you are insulting, then that's the kind of tone that you're going to say is coming from everyone else. And also the other people that are around you might take offense to those kinds of things. So I'd say, just be careful about what it is that you put out there, because especially on something like LinkedIn, where it's a professional network, you wouldn't say things to your boss's face. If you wouldn't say something to your boss's face, you shouldn't be saying it out in the rest of the world. Personal opinions, personal biases, all those kinds of things. There's a tactful and a respectful way to put them out there. And, that doesn't mean shut your mouth. It just means, be safe about how you're saying it. I really like that what you're saying, though, about, this whole world, the lockdown, the quarantine, people unfortunately, losing their jobs or being put on furlough or having the uncertainty of their career right now. I think it's starting to show people that they don't have control over their career. They could be, from the advertising world, they could be a great creative, but that doesn't necessarily mean that their career is safe, because the client is the one that pays the bills, you know?
Yeah.
And if you lose clients, you have to lose people. And so what happens if you lose your job, but then you need to, move on to some other place, or even if you just want to quit and you want to move on yourself, there's this kind of like weird thing about this idea of a personal brand, when really it was just, what's your reputation? That's what it used to be. It was someone asking their friend, oh, have you worked with this, this guy or this girl before? And what are they like? It was getting the recommendations at the bottom of your resume. That's what all of this was. But now you essentially can craft what your reputation is, at least online, and put it out there. And there's a generation of people that are just so used to that now, Gen Z, and they're confused about why people are thinking, well, why are you putting so much information about yourself out there? But then also they're confused about how tactful they have to be when they put information out there. They understand that certain places are curated, Instagram and all that kind of stuff, and LinkedIn, and then some places are a little bit more free flowing, like Snapchat or Instagram stories. But from a professional world, from your career that you want to stand for, you can curate everything that you put out there. And you can make sure that when a recruiter is looking up your name because you've applied for a job, and they see your LinkedIn profile or your Facebook profile or Instagram or whatever, they can get a snapshot of what it is that you stand for from a career perspective. And it doesn't mean that you need thousands of followers or anything like that. It just means that you need to be clear with how you're representing yourself out in the digital world, because your digital footprint, your fingerprint that you're putting out there, is representative of you more than your resume, more than your portfolio if you're a career.
I agree. Yeah. I totally agree. So, probably you're the most suitable person to ask you this, because you're working in advertising, right? People who are, again, looking for a job or trying to build their own thing online, right? We all kind of need a minimum level of visibility at one point in order to get traction, right? We need people to know about us. We very often people get discouraged because whatever they are creating and putting out there is not consumed by people, because people don't really see it, right? So where is this right balance? I have seen like people who just give up and kind of withdraw because it doesn't work from day one, which it never does. And I have seen some that have been very overly self-confident and very self-promotional, and going towards the other extreme, which is kind of, something I don't really like that much. So how to find the right balance in order to gain traction, to get visibility, to be enough out there somehow, and showcase your strengths, but at the same time not really be that pushy self-promotional person.
Right. So I listen to a lot of what Gary Vaynerchuk says. I'm sure there's probably some people out there that do. I'm sure there's a lot of people that hate him. But the thing that he always says is just put your content out there, and if people like it, they'll listen, they'll watch it, they'll read it. And I kind of share that mentality. But there's also this perspective that some people have where it's just like, well, I'm putting it out there, I should be successful, right? Like people should want to see it. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. Like it's the market, really. It's people. If your stuff doesn't fit with what a big group of people wants to hear, well, that means that you're not going to have a big following. But that also doesn't mean that no one's going to want to hear it. From a personal brand perspective, from a business perspective, businesses doing this as well. You don't need to have massive chunks of followers in order to be influential within your circle of people. And it just means figuring out what is the circle of people that you want to talk to, like you were talking about your target audience from early on, and just playing up in that space, so that even if you've got, in the startup world, they say you'd rather have 1,000 zealous customers than 10,000 kind of, I'll watch something that you watch, but I'm never going to engage with you, that kind of thing, right? Or even 100, right? You want to have 100 like hardcore fans, because once you do that, then you know what it is that people are wanting to hear. Figuring out if you have that wide breadth of appeal to people, or if you're more of a smaller niche thing, like that's something that takes a little humility, because I think that it takes a lot of courage for people to put themselves out into the world, as far as content and kind of this raw conversation and all that kind of stuff. But then when that courage is not encouraged because no one is listening to you and no one is watching you, it's a little discouraging. Wow, there's a lot of courage in there. But basically, it's just like, don't get so up in your head about needing to be famous or internet famous or anything like that. Just say things that are important to you. Say things that align with what your career and what your specialty and what your stance is, or if you're a business, what your business is about. But say things that are not only important to you, but important to other people. And that's the biggest thing that people have an issue with. They want to, like you said, they want to promote themselves. And it's not about self-promotion. It's about sharing a knowledge and sharing values of what you hold important, and seeing if anyone else aligns with that. And honestly, it's maybe more of a one-sided conversation, but it is still a conversation. I put out a lot of stuff about how to teach young creatives and what the data-driven world and creativity is all about. And I get a lot of responses and comments from people, and I put more content out about that, and they get more responses back. And that's how I know that is the world that I want to live in. Just because I don't have 3, 4, 5 million followers that want to do it doesn't mean that it's not something that is worthwhile saying. So kind of getting rid of like that ego, playing with a little bit more humility, and understanding that you don't need to be internet famous in order to put your vision out there is really important.
I completely agree with you. And, very often you get this advice, which I personally absolutely hate. What's your opinion about that? Like, fake it till you make it kind of stuff. It's pretty popular out there.
Yeah, because people want to fake being something that they're not, like people respond more to authenticity. They don't respond to fake and just manufactured personalities. It doesn't mean don't curate what you say. It means be careful of what you say. But I'm not going to, go stand in front of the fearless girl statue and say like, this was me, like this is what I'm going to be doing next year, whatever, or like, trying to tell people about. That's a big thing. People talking about things that they don't know about. When people ask me questions, I definitely don't answer. I mean, I have people ask me things about, how do I get into the real estate market and market to them? Like, I don't know. I've never done it before, so I can't answer that question. And they say, oh, I thought you were marketing. Yes, it's different. Faking it till you make it just shows that A, you don't have the confidence, B, you don't have the knowledge to do what it is that you need to do. And if you have confidence in the knowledge you have, then that should be enough. But it will also definitely bite you in the ass, because you will show the cracks in your knowledge. You'll show the cracks in your personality. You will be found out. The internet is a very transparent place, and it'll just come out. There's no point in faking it. Just have confidence in what it is that you have to say. And if you don't have anything to say, don't say it. That's like another big thing. You don't have to do anything. Like just if you're proud of something and you have something you want to put out there that you're proud of, do that. But don't feel forced to have to make a personal brand or have to put out content every day or anything like that. And then you're scraping the bottom of the barrel and saying, well, maybe I have an opinion on what we should do about, the apartheid, but you don't know anything about that. So why are you going to be talking about it? So fake it till you make it. Bad idea. Don't do it. Just be yourself. Be real.
Don't do it, for sure. So I mean, I totally agree with you. It's kind of, people sense it, that fake thing, even if you can't point out what it is exactly, you just feel it. And you just get the vibes. So no, definitely. I mean, we spoke about authenticity and kind of vulnerability and the scary part of putting yourself out there. It's hard. I mean, I get it. It's not very easy to just go out there and put yourself in a situation where pretty much anyone on internet will feel that they have the right to just comment and tell whatever they want about you, right? I mean, initially, that's what many people are scared of. We end up thinking about how our hair looks and, what is the lighting and kind of, and come up with things that are not really that essential, right? I know people who haven't launched podcasts yet because they're still figuring out the ideal background, because they have bought a green screen and they're learning to operate the software and everything else, right? So it's all comes because they end up trying to be perfect with their content, with the way they look, with the way they want to sort of enter this space. So authenticity, I think, also works when you put out your personality, and when you put out your personality, basically, you would like to sort of highlight your unique sides, right? So many people end up coming to me saying, "Yeah, but I don't have a unique side," which usually is never the case. But how do you look for it? Like, how should people kind of find that unique part, or that side of the personality that will help them stand out or help them become kind of different?
Yeah, it's weird. We spend every day with ourselves, and so we don't notice the things that we grow into and that we do and we become. And because of that, it makes it really difficult to see what's unique about us. And we start to think, well, everyone's just like me, because we know ourselves and we just assume that's kind of just what humans do. Everyone is like me. The best thing to do, honestly, is just ask people. And ask people you trust. I don't mean like put the question out to the internet and have them decide for you. I mean, ask your friends, ask your family, because oftentimes they'll have more insight into you than you have into yourself, because you put blinders on when it comes to yourself. I didn't realize certain parts about me until my creative directors, as I was coming up in my career, started telling me about them. Someone just mentioned to me, Jeremy, what I think is really great about you is that you can see how all the pieces fit together. And I never really thought about that. I thought I was just about, making great work and putting my all into my creativity. And I didn't realize that one of my strengths was kind of taking what they say is the 40,000 foot view and being able to see, well, how does this piece fit with this piece, and how do campaigns work together without feeling like each piece is mirroring the other one. And so that actually embracing that became something really important to me as I became a creative director, because it became necessary in order to make a whole campaign feel integrated. And I didn't know that until someone else told me that. And so I would say just talk to people. But also just think about, well, what is it you care about? I mean, I just happen to have this idea of technology and creativity working together, and that became my niche and my voice. But, I have a friend that's really into cycling, and he created a company with his friends that was making cycling gear. And the shirts and the shorts and the gear and all that kind of stuff. And they don't have a massive following either. They have about the same amount of people as I do, and they just make it for really niche groups of people. And it's kind of a side business stuff that they do, but that became what he was passionate about. And so they started just taking videos of their rides that they would do every morning. And that happened. And he didn't even think, well, this is like something we're going to make a business of. He was just always into cycling. And so when he just realized, oh, other people are probably into that too, he started putting stuff out there about it. The best thing, honestly, is figuring out what are two things that you have interest in and smashing those two things together. That's essentially what ideation is. It's something you saw over here and something you saw over here, and you put the two things together, and that is what creates a new idea. And that's also what is really good about figuring out what your specialty is, what your niche is. And so I would just suggest doing that. It helps a lot. And get out of your own head. Ask other people.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, going back to advertising, very often when I talk to people about marketing in general, very often what they kind of strategize about is, we have this budget, we'll put it on on a PPC will drive traffic, right? So they are very strategic and very tactical in terms of, okay, you put the PPC in there, people will click on the banner, they will come to your website, we're done, all sorted, easy. Like, why really get into many details, right? So my counter argument to this is that, yes, but basically what it does is it amplifies what you've already got. So if you're not ready in there, and if your product is not good enough, or if there are some issues in there, you're basically paying for more people to find that out and to see that you're not ready yet. So what's your kind of what's your approach? What's the role of the digital advertising in the whole kind of marketing pieces and puzzle altogether? Like, just doing that, is it even gonna help if it's only the only thing you're doing?
Oh yeah, I mean, marketing and advertising, it's a megaphone is essentially all it is. And if the thing you're saying is trash, then it's just, you're going to be talking about trash a lot louder. And if it is, if you have one of those megaphones that changes your voice when someone finally starts seeing or hearing you speak normally and they don't like what they have to hear, it doesn't matter what the megaphone was saying. So you really need to, like you said, make sure that you've got all your ducks in a row. And that just means that you've actually taken the time to figure out a product that is worthwhile selling and talking about, that you've actually just determined what it is that is important to you. I don't want this to discourage people from starting, because I think that's a big excuse that people use. It's like, oh, I don't know, I'm not ready. Like you said, I don't know what background I'm going to put behind me, or ooh, the product is still in the beta and I'm not so sure about that, or I don't know what is important to me, so I'm not going to start saying anything to anybody. That's the step of making. There's, I mean, anyone that's a creative knows there's 90% of the work takes place beforehand, where you have to start ideating, you have to start concepting, you have to start strategizing and figuring out, well, what is it that we want to do before we make the thing, right? So the same thing comes in the process of figuring out what you want to say and the content you want to put out there. So if you don't have at least a clear line of what you stand for, just start there. What do you stand for? And you probably shouldn't start, but that's a pretty easy thing to figure out. I know it seems pretty deep, like it could be difficult, but like it's not. It doesn't require hours of dev to create a good product. It doesn't require a whole lot of strategizing to figure out how you're going to start putting content out and all that. All it means is, well, what's important to you? What do you stand for? Embrace that, and then just test and learn. That's the big thing. I mean, one of the reasons why I love the digital world is because it takes a lot of the influence from the startup world. And the startup world is all about create an MVP, minimum viable product, put it out there and see how to tweak it and pivot every once in a while until you get product market fit. And once you get that, then you test it, you learn, you test it, you learn, you adjust, and you keep doing it until you get something that is right for your customers. And your customers are defined by the people who liked the thing along the way. So we do the same thing with advertising. We put out content, we put out our marketing. If the people react to certain things, we embrace that, we move forward with that. If people don't react to other things, we put it on the side, and maybe we'll try it out later, see maybe it wasn't the right time, but we move forward with what works. That's a big part of what data-driven creative is, embracing what it is that people are engaging with and creating more of that. But then also understanding why is it they're engaging with that is a big part of it. Because a lot of people are like, oh, people only watch the first 6 seconds of videos, so therefore we should only make 6-second videos. True, you should make 6-second videos, but that also means that if you make a 30-second video, put the most important things you need to communicate in the first 6 seconds, and then have fun with the other 24 seconds. So I forget where I was going with any of that, but basically, yes, don't let any of this stop you. Just embrace the idea of testing and learning and constantly creating and tweaking those different things. Don't feel like I'm not ready, because there's only one thing you need to be ready with. What do you want to say?
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Just getting to I mean, it feels like we've covered a lot in here in terms of, like, we addressed quite important questions. We sort of gave a bit of direction of where to look for answers. Now, about the creativity part of it, like being creative and kind of, catching that creative wave and being consistently creative is something that is a challenge, right? You can have these sparks where, you feel like writing something or creating something, you just do it, move on, and then something happens and you're not so inspired anymore. So it's kind of, okay, right? Okay, if it's just a hobby. Very often you need to be consistent with your output. And if your output needs to be creative, how do you maintain that creativity? Oops. Did we lose him? Okay.
Oh, I'm back. Are you back?
Yeah, you froze there.
Great.
So
sorry about that.
What do I need to repeat? Did you hear the question, or I have to repeat it?
Let's start from creativity.
So creativity, it's kind of, it may come at sparks. You just, you feel inspiration, right. You just create something. And then for another bit, you may not be so inspired, and it would be very hard to come up with something, which is okay if it's just a hobby. If you are in a situation where you have to consistently create things, how do you maintain that level of creativity? How do you boost it?
Oh, it's difficult. I often say that everyone's creative, but not everyone is a creative. And the clear differentiator is exactly what you said. It's being consistently, dependably creative. Mm-hmm. And there was a documentary called Art and Copy. It was made probably more than a decade or so ago now. George Lois, one of the great ad men of the day, he said, one of the most, I think it was something along this, I'm summarizing, the scariest and best thing about being a creative is having no idea where your next idea is going to come from. Yeah. And it's terrifying. And every creative, and capital C creative, person that has to constantly be coming up with ideas because it's their job, has a different way of feeding that. Some people love going to museums. Some people are saying, well, I just need to listen to some music. Some people just want to go on a walk. Other people, feed their creativity and are able to come up with ideas constantly by staying up to date, reading the annuals and magazines and all that kind of stuff. And so there's something different for everyone. But the key part, the common element across all of them, is figuring out what feeds your creativity, because you can't just keep outputting creative. You need to get it back into you. And whether that is, like I said, music or museums or art or anything, everybody has their own thing. I mean, I started doing this as a way to feed my own creativity, because there's only so much advertising that you can do where you feel like, well, I just want to do something different. I want to do something that lets this creative nugget in me just kind of grow a little bit more. And then I realized that it was something that helped out other people as well. So that could be another thing to allow people to have the excuse to put content out there, because that can help your creative juice. A lot of people have a creative process, and they say, well, first thing I like to do is I like to take the brief, let it marinate, kind of figure out, what bounces around in my head, what's going to kind of pop out. And then I need a week for that. And then I need a couple days where I bounce it off with a partner, which is also a huge thing. There's a reason why they put an art director and a copywriter together, because when you have two people bouncing ideas back and forth off of each other with different perspectives, it creates something better than either one of them could on their own. Yeah. And then there's a whole lot of different ways to execute it. But, if there was a formula for creativity and how to consistently come up with good creative, I would not be the one to figure that out, because, and I love systems. I love the idea of formulas. I love systems. I love doing all that kind of stuff, but people would have figured that out a long time ago, and a lot more people would be doing it. And you can tell when creativity is formulaic, right? Like, you can tell when you're listening to a song by an artist that you really loved their first album, but when they had to start churning out an album every year after year after year, and they're starting to become a little predictable and a little formulaic, it's not as good. because they've been forced to create, and they probably haven't had the opportunity to allow that organically to happen. And the same thing is for marketing and advertising and any kind of creativity. So the big thing is just figure out what feeds you and do that as much as you're putting stuff out into the world, whether that is through your career or just a personal brand or anything, because it's important to feed that creativity.
So do you think that commercializing creativity kind of, damages its quality? Like, serialized fiction, serialized movies and all that stuff? Because you're forced to create the continuation, or no?
Not at all. Not at all. I think that the thing that harms it is when it's forced, because when, serialized fiction, okay. There was, what was it? Lost. There was a show several years ago, right?
Yep.
I believe they had planned out 4 seasons, maybe 5 seasons, but the show ran for 6 seasons, 6.5 seasons. And at one point there was a writer's strike, and they didn't want to do the last season in order to bypass the writer's strike. You could tell one of those seasons sucked, right? And it was because they were forced to fit this piece of creative into something that they had already kind of figured out how it was going to live. That's why creative feels, that's what harms creative, is when you force it. If you have an idea of even a loose plan of what this is going to do as you go into time, it doesn't matter if it is 1,000 episodes or 5 episodes. It still can be just as creative as you expected it to be. And once you start having to force it in a direction or in a pattern that it was not really meant for, that's when it starts to get damaged. Commercializing creative, I have no feelings that it harms creativity. I think that you can make creativity commercialized, but again, one of the harms of marketing and advertising is you've got 2 sides to it, right? You've got the client that wants to speak about themselves, and you've got the agency that only wants to speak to people. And so you want to land somewhere in the middle here, but you've got these 2 sides that are pulling against each other. And one way or the other, it's going to get a little bit further the other direction. The great ones are when they've hit that balance right in the middle, right? And so the commercialization of it means that someone's paying the bill. And if it usually lands on the side of the client that's going to be paying the bill, oftentimes they have to force it to speak more about themselves, which is not what people want to hear. But people also can't just talk about themselves, because then they don't know anything about the brand. So forcing it one way or another is what harms that creativity. It's the commercialization of it is just getting paid for your ideas, which is great. Because if we didn't get paid for our ideas, I don't know what a lot of us would do.
Starving artist.
Starving artist. That's what I could have done. I'd be more prepared for this time.
To wrap it up and kind of to make a full circle, we started by talking about data-driven marketing and then the creative side of it, and that things are shifting now. Things are progressing and changing. So, what's your forecast like in the future? Where is it going to land? Like, how are these 2 sides of the thing gonna develop into what?
I am not Nostradamus. I don't know where the world is going to go. All I know is where I'm at right now, and where people who are probably 5 to 10 years behind are. And unfortunately, that's 80% of the industry, right? So where I see people going, which is what a lot of the savvy agencies and everyone are doing right now, is being both effective and creative. And that is the biggest pushback that I get when I talk about data-driven creativity is, like I said, from creatives that say, you're just telling me like make the button red or whatever. And I say, that's not what it really is about. It's about figuring out how to use the data, how to use the information we have in order to understand who is the specific person or the group of people, the smaller group of people that we want to talk to, and engaging them in a more unique way than it would be if we were talking to everyone at the same time. And the reason why that's so good is because from a media perspective, it's more effective. You don't have to spend money on so much mass media. There should still be mass media, just not as much because there's so many more options. And from a creative perspective, it's great because you make more. And as long as you don't have the ego of, I want to work on a $10 million production, then it's great because you get to execute more of your ideas than you would in the past because you need to speak to more individual groups of people. And so that's about what the efficacy is. That's what about the efficiency is, because it's understanding that, you don't waste, you learn what works and you build on top of that, but then bringing that creativity into it is really what that core is. So, yeah, I wouldn't be doing this and saying this and talking about this all the time if I didn't think that this is where the future is. Because I hope I have a long career in this industry, and I really feel like this is where everything is going. I'm not the only one either. I mean, you look at a lot of the big networks, and there's a reason why they're leaning into that. You look at a lot of the agencies that are doing really well, and it's because and building up, it's because that is what they're doing. And a lot of the ones that are hurting, and unfortunately it's the ones that were great creative shops back in the day, are the ones that are not embracing new ways of executing creativity. And if they did, maybe they wouldn't have as much trouble. But I just hope that we don't lose really great creative shops because they are getting stuck in nostalgia.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. Well, thank you very much for your time. I really enjoyed the conversation. So, and thank you for everyone who watched this live, and to everyone who's going to listen to the podcast later on. So thanks a lot. And subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review. I'll meet you in the next episode. Thanks again, Jeremy. Bye.
Great. Thank you. Bye.